we've got here are called oyster mushrooms. Now, oyster mushrooms many times will simply grow, they will look like they have no stem, like you see right here. But I know from growing them, I've cultivated them myself a lot, I know that sometimes they do appear to have a stem, such as this. If you look underneath, they are gilled. They have fine gills that sort of just make their way onto the stem and sort of blend into the stem. They can be very white. These are kind of a really light cream color. They can be even whiter than this, or they can be a tan color. They can even be kind of a dark brown color. And I know there are some exotic species as well. They come in pinks and sort of yellowish colors, but usually in the wild, at least in these parts, you find them anywhere from a white to a brown and anywhere in between. They always grow on wood. They many times grow in great numbers like this, and they pretty much grow all year round. Even in the winter, if it's particularly warm and there's been a lot of rain. But right now I think it's the last day of July, or yeah, either the last day or second to last day of July. And we just had some rain over the past few days, so here they are popping out. I find them most prominently usually in the fall, but they're an excellent eating mushroom. Few little ones popping up right there. And here they are the next day after a little bit of rain. There's a little patch of oysters on this little log. What are we looking at?
We're looking at oysters.
Yeah. These here are false turkey tail. They're not oysters, but these nice big ones right here certainly are.
There he is, the mushroom hunter in action, picking some oysters.
That's pretty nice and fresh. Yeah, I'll take those for sure. Alright, now these are oyster mushrooms. This is my first oysters of the spring. And hopefully by the time I put this video on, I've shown you some oysters growing off of wood, because the oyster always grows from wood. I just wanted to show you how they can also look like they're growing from the ground. Which in this case these do. However, I don't know if you can see the indentation here. This actually used to be a stump. You can see some of the old decaying wood right here still. So they're actually growing from the wood that's under the ground, which is why it can be a little deceptive. So, but they are oysters. These here are probably just a little bit past their prime. This cluster here actually looks really good, really nice right now. So I'm gonna take them home and eat them. Okay, I'm sorry it's a little dark right now, but I gotta explain what's going on here. Hopefully I'll get a better shot of this in the daytime. But I have a sawdust bed here that I planted an oyster mycelium in 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago, and I got a good crop of oysters in the fall. Unfortunately, I had a canopy built over it with all this bamboo on top of it just to provide a little extra shade, and it has collapsed on me with some of the storms we've gotten recently. And my plan is to rebuild it, but for now I've got a big old oyster growing right there. There's that big one. Some more down there too. A smaller one. Say hi.
Hi, I'm holding a gigantic oyster for Dad. My name's Shaylin, by the way.
This is the biggest single oyster I've ever seen. I'm sure they get bigger. But got that along with some smaller specimens here. This oyster is about 8 inches across. Pretty good size. 1 inch thick stem. Okay, so here's my sawdust bed that I planted oyster mycelium in, that I had that big oyster growing out of. And right here, got some little oysters popping up out of that log. Now what I did, and I've never seen this done, all the YouTube videos I've watched on growing your own mushrooms, I've never seen this done before. I've seen where you can create a sawdust bed or a straw bed and plant oyster mycelium in it, something like this. And I've seen where you can inoculate logs with the plugs, drill some holes and put the plugs in to inoculate logs with oyster mycelium or shiitake or whatever it may be. But what I did is I mixed the oyster mycelium into the sawdust, and then I embedded some logs in it. I actually put some slits in the bottom of them, and I just wanted to experiment and see if the mycelium would work its way into the log and if the oysters would eventually grow out of the logs, and that is what happened. I'm very excited that I was successful to do that. Can't remember for sure if I've pointed this out yet or not on the oysters, but I just want to show you like I said, they do have a little bit of a stem that comes out of the wood, but it's almost always on one side. They do have the gills that run down the stem a little bit. Sometimes, like I showed you in the intro part of the video, sometimes that stem is just a little bit longer and it sticks up a little bit. And once in a while, it will actually come in the middle of the mushroom a little bit, so that, let's see what this one looks like here. Okay, like it's here. We actually have gills all the way around the stem here. That's not always the case with the oysters. In fact, more often than not, the stem will be on one side, and the gills will actually start here and go all the way around, but not fully circle the stem like it does here. But it's just something you kind of have to, once you get to know what they look like, you can recognize an oyster even if it does stand up with a stem in the middle. But usually it's like this, the stem on the side and the gills sort of fanning out from there. And here's an example of one that has the stem closer to the middle. Well, I think I mentioned that the oyster is a mushroom that can grow year-round. And in this video, I've shown you some from mid-July, when it was 90 degrees out. I think it was mid-July or August, somewhere around there. I've shown you some from early March. Now here it is, December 3rd. There was frost on the ground this morning. And here I've got some growing in my oyster bed on the log that I've shown you already. So yeah, even in the middle of the winter time, if we get a little bit of a warm spell, if it's just below freezing temperatures the whole time, they will probably not grow. But if you get a little bit of a warm spell where things are thawing out a little bit, they can certainly grow in the winter time too. Got several trays of oysters cut up here, and I'm going to dehydrate them. The oysters actually dehydrate and rehydrate very well. So anytime I come across a whole bunch of oysters, which we did today, I usually just eat a few for dinner that night. Maybe we'll save a few in the fridge for some omelets or something like that. Just dehydrate them. I have jars full of them. There's a jar of dehydrated oysters. You can see these ones on the top were the white variety when they were fresh. They dried to a light tannish yellow kind of color. But down in here you can see I have some that were the darker brown variety. And they have, even when they're dehydrated, the darker brown caps. I just love the smell of dehydrated oyster mushrooms. It's got a very earthy, just a rich mushroomy smell, and I think it's wonderful. Okay, here's a good example of some nice brown ones. I don't remember now if I ever got a good shot of some brown oysters for you. I know I mentioned they come from white to brown and anywhere in between. And I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but it seems to me that in the late fall or in the winter time is when I've found the most dark brown colored oysters. And I got these from the same log that I've gotten white ones on earlier in the year. So it could be that it's a time of the year thing, or it could just be that for some other factors they tend to grow in different colors sometimes, but they are oysters just like the others, and they are delicious. I think that's all I have on the oyster mushroom. Thank you very much for watching.